But back to tomorrow. The Liberals may have that late surge of momentum. We're going to find out in News Poll very shortly. But is it enough to deliver another 3 years in government? And more importantly, do they deserve it? Well, one person I think who does deserve to be there is Senator Amanda Stoker from Queensland. She joins me now. Welcome, Senator. It's wonderful to have you on the show. Where's your 30-second elevator pitch for the Liberals to win tomorrow?
Well, the Liberal National Coalition has got this country through a pretty rough patch in pretty good condition. By every international measure, we are the world's leading economy. That means with record low unemployment, there's opportunity for people of all walks of life to lift, to achieve their goals in a way that would never be possible under a Labor government. In contrast, you've got a Labor leader who, despite 26 years in Parliament, still seems to have his L plates on, doesn't know the basics of the economy, doesn't know the unemployment rate, doesn't know the cash rate, doesn't know his NDIS policy, doesn't know whether his policies have been costed. And in fact, when they did decide to bring out their costings on the day that the media blackout happened, they revealed a bodgy old Word document that hadn't been independently verified by anybody. Our country deserves better than that. And while I don't pretend that the PM or the Coalition are perfect by any measure, we have actually achieved some pretty significant things over the last 3 years, and we have avoided a whole lot of significant harms. And on the other hand, we've got what can only be described as a kind of clownish incompetence. I deeply believe that this country needs the kind of strong leadership that can get us into a secure economic recovery and to provide strong defence at a time when our international position is more vulnerable than it has been for decades. And I don't want to see a hung parliament that's negotiating with a whole bunch of extreme groups being the barrier to doing what this country needs to secure its position. And I don't, above all things, want to see it in the hands of people like Richard Marles, who run their speeches by the Chinese embassy, or indeed people like Mr Chalmers, whose costings suggest a round about $8.4 billion year-on-year deficit in excess of anything the Coalition might have done, as well as another $52 billion worth of off-the-budget spending. I mean, the position I actually think is really quite clear.
Yeah, you make a compelling case there, Senator, and I've got to say, you deeply believe in that the Liberals are a much better option for the country. Can I tell you, I deeply believe that you are one of the brightest, most capable and shining lights within the Liberal Party. But you're up against it yourself now. You're number 3 on the ticket there in Queensland. It's a fiercely fought contest in the Senate. What happens if, and you probably don't want to contemplate the what ifs, but do you see a future in politics if you're not elected tomorrow?
Well, I plan to get elected tomorrow, and that's my complete focus. And if the judgement of the Queensland and Australian people doesn't align with what I think is the deep good sense and common sense that lies in all of them, then I'll reassess. But I really do think that the position at number 3 remains winnable. It's just really important people understand what the choices mean and how fragmentation on the right, particularly in this contest, won't give you someone to, keep the bastards honest. What it will give you is a green. And that is actually the most dangerous possible thing for this country at this point in time.
All right, I'm glad you're here, Senator, because we've just had the news poll come out. It's 53 to Labor, 47 for the Coalition. It's not probably the news that you wanted to hear, but if it's a uniform swing across the country, there's some pain for the Coalition. But do you see any hope in this, given that it might be in strong Labor seats where the surge is on, and the Liberals, I mean, the Prime Minister's been out in some of these marginal Labor seats, and he seemed kind of optimistic of picking some of those up.
Look, what we saw at the last election of the polls is that they were notoriously unreliable. Even if this one is reliable, half the country still needs to vote. So it definitely isn't over yet. And if anything, this should motivate people of sensible mind to cast aside any grievances they might have had with the coalition over the last little while and say, it's time to bite the bullet. It's time to do what the country needs right now, and that's to rally behind the coalition that's best placed to protect us from the real and present threats that lie in our future. I think, if anything, that's what should be the takeaway from this poll result you've just quoted to me.
Yeah, you mentioned, this is a fragmented section, the right side of politics at the moment. Who can predict where the votes are going to return and the preferences flow? And I think that's going to be critically important. But people do have to think about where they're putting their vote and why. Is the risk of what they're doing much greater than the potential reward? And is the known, even if you don't like them that much better than the unknown who you could loathe enormously? What, though, do you think? Okay, so firstly, you're going to tell me you should vote LNP number one and nothing else. But what do you think has proved the attraction of some of these minor parties, that it's fragmented a bit of the Liberals' vote?
I think there's a few things at play. One is that it is often the case, and it was true in the Howard years just as it is true now, that coalition governments that have been established for some time, as they try and reach for the broad church, can at times alienate what you and I might call the base. And it's important that those major parties, and particularly the coalition, maintain people within their ranks who are prepared to fight for the beliefs that are so important to the people who care enough about them to sign up a membership form or to stand on a polling booth, or to be that kind of reliable group that can be turned to as the strong foundation on which we then build as we reach into marginal places. In many ways, that's another good reason to vote for the LNP in the Senate.
Yeah, I'm going to take that as a backhanded slap. Corey, you should have stayed and fought instead of gone off and splintered off into a non-elite party that I created. Before I let you go, look, there's the weird and wonderful that happens on the campaign trail. What's something that probably hasn't made the news that's made you laugh or smile or made you angry from your own personal campaigning experience?
One thing that's really made me smile over the huge amount of pre-poll I've done over the last 2 weeks is the number of people who've got small businesses who rock up to the booth with all of their staff all at once and say, we want the blue how to vote cards. And of course, sure, no problems. But when I ask why, they say it's because JobKeeper saved my business and saved the jobs of all of my staff here. And even though it's not something we ordinarily would have liked, we are grateful for it. And I'm really assured by that because, if I'm honest, something like JobKeeper as a subsidy pushes the boundaries of someone who's a philosophical liberal and conservative type person. But it was the right thing to do at the time. And to see people still grateful for it because their business is alive and because they're still in a job now, really does warm the heart that when you're under the pump and you're making the tough decisions and, you don't always get them right, there are people who really do value the fact that you're prepared to keep them in mind, particularly that small business cohort. And, I just want to say thank you to not only those people who rock up at the booth, but to the huge number of volunteers from the LNP and the community who come to put in their little bit of time on the booth. It matters so much. And, we don't have people on the payroll like the unions do. everyone who's helping for the LNP as a volunteer, and I've got to say a big thank you. It's pretty heartwarming to see how many good people are prepared to show up and fight for me and for the party I believe in.
Well, Amanda Stoker, it's a reminder that every policy decision that you make in Canberra does affect people in the real world, and for good and for bad. And I think you've painted a very strong picture about the good, because it was absolutely important. You are one of the best figures in Canberra. More strength to your arm. I wish you every success tomorrow, and I trust that you will be in politics for a very, very long time. Thanks for joining me on Bernardi tonight.